Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and welcome back to our subscriber game tournament as round 4, or the semi-final round, is finally kicking off, with our first matchup here between Will Be Deed in the green versus Zero in the red. And as always, before we jump into the match itself, let's first take a look at both players' draft, which is extra interesting this time, as we have large army setting on. So that means instead of just 3 generals to talk about, we now have 6 general worth of retinues to look at on both sides. So first, let's take a look at Will Be Deed's general selection. He went with Cao Cao, Lü Bu, Huang Fusong, Zhang Liang, He Jin, and Guo Jia. It's a pretty well-rounded comp with a little bit of everything, including the unit choices, as we see a few range units, some frontline polearm units. We also have a very sturdy line of melee infantry at the premium end too with the Imperial unit choice, and then 8 units of cavalry. Now, these players can go wild here on large army settings because they now have double the fund as well at 30,000. And taking a look at what Will Be Deed did, he definitely went with the more premium options. So we already talked about the Imperial unit choices, not only those 6 melee infantry, there's also 4 of the Imperial Gate Guards, the Spear Polearm variant, to sort of protect, I guess, the side flank since they don't have shield. And there's also 2 Protector of Heavens on Lü Bu to round out those defensive polearm units. And then we also have 4 Xiliang cavalry, which are really cost effective cavalry units at a cheap price for high charge, and also 4 Tyrant Slayers, which I believe are meant to help kill enemy generals. This is a pretty interesting choice because shock cavalries are pretty good at killing generals, plus the 4 times damage on these units definitely will help. But the trick is whether the enemy generals will have any sort of splash ability that can quickly wipe out cavalry that crowd around them. Regardless, this is a pretty interesting composition, and a pretty standard one too, with well-defined frontline melee units, flank protecting melee units, and shock cavalry to support. The range, while only 3 units, at least provides some sort of threat. The use of the 2 heavy crossbow is interesting. I think the issue here is he basically ran out of money to recruit 1 more regular crossbow, and he didn't want to spend any of the money on upgrading all the units, since most of them are infantry units or melee units in general, so there's not a lot of benefit for upgrading 1 or 2 points, especially since they're already premium, so the extra morale point's not really going to do too much, so he went with 2 heavy versions. I don't hate it, you get extra armor for them, a little bit of extra health as well, so that's going to help. And looking on the right here, Zero actually went pretty thematic with Cao Cao and the Wei faction being featured here across the board. Cao Cao, Yue Jin, Dian Wei, Guo Jia, Xia Houyuan, and Xu Huang. All Wei generals, and therefore they have access to a bunch of northern units, and we see a bunch of them. The northern veteran spear polearm unit on Dian Wei, the regular one on Xu Huang. Since he's on the bottom here, I guess he just ran out of money at the end and went with 4 of the cheaper ones. And then we also have 4 of the Northern Veteran Lancer Cavalry, as well as the regular version, split between Cao Cao and Xia Houyuan. I really like the cheaper version here. They're very cost efficient shock cavalry at 580. I'm actually pretty against the more expensive 4 units here on Xia Houyuan. I feel like those could have been spent a bit better on some other unit. Perhaps 4 more of the cheaper unit would have been better, and the extra money can be spent filling out the rest of this army as there are still 3 empty slots. I'm also not a huge fan of the Northern Spear unit. I believe the Qingzhou Spear options would have been better, whether with shield or without. They have the Misplaced Devotion, which can help them dish out quite a bit of damage, and they function pretty much the same in terms of defensive performance, just like these. And then we have 5 crossbow units, all upgraded a little bit to tier 2 and 3 to use up the excess fund. And finally, 6 unit of the Qingzhou melee infantry on Yue Jin, which is pretty interesting. I love these choices here because all Qingzhou units are very good. And Cao Cao is also carrying 4 of his northern mounted archers. Now these have typically a little bit less range. They do have a shield and sword option, I believe, on them in terms of their alternate weapons, so the shield is going to give them a little bit more range block chance compared to the Northern Raiders, which are on Yuan Shao's faction. These offer a little bit more defensive stats, but gives up quite a bit charge bonus to make up for that. Overall, this is going to be a pretty standard battle setup. Both sides have melee infantry, have nice bit of polearm, have some range options, and quite a bit of cavalry making up their army. So very similar composition, duking it out on this very flat open map. I expect to see some formations, I expect to see some harassment from the cavalry, especially the range cavalry on Zero's side to kind of provoke the enemy into engaging them. And ultimately, the most interesting part about this battle is whether the more premium units on the left side under Will Be Deed will help him overcome the sheer quantity of unit on Zero's side. And as always, since this is romance mode, the use of the generals are going to be crucial here. And looking at the general on both sides, I would actually still favor the general on Will Be Deed's side as a bit stronger. Lu Bu is very powerful, and you also have Hell of Arrows on Huang Fusong, which is something that's not matched on the right side. Combine that with He Jin, who's a pretty capable duelist. I would say the sheer power of the generals on the left is a bit higher than the general on the right, but I do notice one thing. I believe the generals on the left don't actually have any ability that will reduce enemy morale, whereas on the right we have the standard roar on Xiao Houyuan, who has just a very generic vanguard tree, as well as the roar on Xu Huang, who actually has a vanguard skill in Roar of the Beasts and Flame the Phoenix as well. So those abilities are going to be pretty crucial. And while you might think these low-level roars or morale debuffs might not work very well against the premium units on Will Be Deed's side, it might actually just work against his generals, which are not really unbreakable apart from Lu Bu. And that morale difference might prove to be a factor here. It's curious that Cao Cao is the lone recruit on the left side as well, because I think perhaps Yuan Shao would have filled that role better and provide a decent morale boost for the rest of the generals. Certainly Yuan Shao has less attack, but his Distant Courage provides 50 points morale, which is massive, plus the extra 50% charge bonus, which can help the cavalry perform even better as well. So let's see how this plays out. This is going to be quite an exciting battle, just in terms of sheer micro required for both sides. Not only do you have to control all these units, but just activating abilities off 6 generals is a nightmare in the heat of battle. So let's see how they do, and we'll jump into battle right now. Alrighty, so as we load into game here, we're going to pause the game and take it into tactical view to look at both sides before we start the battle. And taking a look at their deployment choices, both sides stayed within their deployment zone. And looking at the units, it seems like both players are actually taking advantage of this wide open map with nowhere to hide to place their units in beautiful formations for us to enjoy. And we'll start with Will Be Deed's side. So take a quick look at his generals. Tier 3, Tier 3, Tier 3. Yes, across the board. I think all the players have learned that Tier 3 generals are rather valuable, and everyone has fully upgraded their generals. Looking at the formation, pretty expected. The frontline unit is the Imperial Sword Guards. They're excellent because they have the shield, access to a variety of formations. I don't see Turtle here, which is interesting. I think that depends. I wonder why they don't have Turtle here. It has to do with the commanders, I guess. In this case, I think they're under Huang Fusong. Not that Turtle is necessary, because they have pretty high range block chance even if the crossbow should come up. And because they're on the Sentinel General, they actually have charge negation. If they combine that with a formation, they pretty much will take 0 charge damage. They probably wouldn't even get knocked down if they have high charge resistance on top of that. And the flanks are protected by Imperial Gate Guards, as we mentioned, plus the Protector of Heaven sort of acting as a rear guard. 3 units of the crossbow, 2 of them heavy, 1 regular. Same exact damage in terms of bow, just more armor and a little bit more ammo, as well as more health on the heavy version. So if that's all the money he had left, that's fine. And then we have the cavalry. Tyrant Slayers, all 4 on 1 flank. Interesting. These, as we mentioned, are general killers. 4 times damage against generals, so we're upping that to around, this side would be 92, this side would be 128. Quite high damage, armor piercing, very high charge. They can actually race generals pretty well. And on the left flank, that means we have the C-Down Cavalry, which is a pretty cheap cavalry unit with very high charge as well. decent amount of morale boost here, inspired by generals. One of them has encouraged, or maybe multiple one has encouraged, but they're getting encouraged. There's a lot of own army boost when you have 6 generals. What you don't realize is in campaign, there are a lot of bonuses that says plus 10% armor piercing damage if when commanding. Some of them say when for own army. Here with 6 generals, all those bonuses will be own army. I believe all when commanding bonuses become own army bonuses in multiplayer, and that's going to give you that huge boost of damage. As you can see here, 56 armor piercing. I think the regular amount should be around 34, so we're getting a huge chunk increased here with more generals, and that I believe is also the same with range damage. Normally these will be 42, but because they have sentinels and strategists, which can boost the armor piercing range damage, they're getting a slight buff on those units as well. So those are things you might, kind of ignore normally, but here in multiplayer with, stacking generals on larger army settings, a lot more interesting stats can appear like this. Now, there's not too much to talk about. A lot of generals we're very familiar with. Huang Fusong is trying to get a couple good hail of arrows off, especially with bigger formation and more units. You can get more payoff for that. Lu Bu obviously has the ability to freeze enemy units in place, very good at pursuing cavalry. You freeze the cavalry to let your cavalry charge them, and they take quite a bit more damage because the reduction in their melee evasion on top of that. Cao Cao can shorten everyone else's cooldown. That's sort of his main contribution. Extra morale and speed for nature's ally, and extra melee evasion unbreakable for nearby units. He Jin is actually a decent duelist. He has ways to boost melee evasion, as well as a sacrifice own health ability for smash damage. 5% health for 11k damage is a very good deal. I highly recommend using this. Don't be shy. 5% health is not much, and 11k damage is huge. Now, in the middle here, Zhang Liang is not a general we see very often, and his ability, the unique one, is Lord of the People. This activates when he's about to die. Nearby units will get 60 seconds of plus 50 morale and plus 10% armor. All the Zhang brothers have a near death or at death ability, and this is Zhang Liang's. I don't think it's very good. It's very hard to control this because 20%, it's not an easy number to calculate here. Like, when exactly is he going to hit 8k health? You have to have units nearby to take advantage of this, and it's only 60 seconds. So there's a lot of constraining factors here. His other ability, Way of War, is sort of a sentinel ability. It builds up as he stays in combat, extra melee evasion, and flat boost to his melee armor piercing damage, which does not really matter that much, but this is a range ability, so it's sort of boosting for other units nearby. For him, it's just nothing because his damage is way higher. Unless you're playing on records mode, this is really a boost for nearby units. So that's why he's staying in the center here. This is an interesting sort of ability to utilize because he has to stay in combat for this to even trigger. And I just don't know if you can consistently do that around your infantry. He has to stay rather defensive. Guo Jia is a suppression general. I think a lot of players make the mistake of not running Guo Jia with the rest of the units. He's very useful with other generals. He can help them shut down enemy abilities and reduce their armor. So that's his main contribution. I wonder if these are going to stay split. Or perhaps WillBD can just hold a defensive position and take the fight, within his force. But it's going to be hard to convince the enemy to come towards you unless you brought perhaps a trebuchet, which I think in this situation might have been a pretty decent investment given how much funding both sides had. One trebuchet wouldn't really hurt the rest of the army as much in this scenario and can present them a pretty unique opportunity to force the enemy into some tough situations. And speaking of the enemy, we have Zero here, a very tightly packed formation. But he doesn't really have to worry about, say, Yan Baihu with the hidden poison volley because both of them brought Guo Jia for that foresight, and there's really no forest to hide in, so perfect vision, no stock units can hide. We have both a front line and a rear line, and this is because enemies could guerrilla deploy on you, very cautious here. Crossbow units in the middle, and we have Northern Z infantry on the side. I don't really favor these northern units. Their damage is very similar to that of the Z infantry. Almost no defense, but not punished as hard in multiplayer because range units are just not that popular. So It doesn't matter if they have 0% range block chance, not that many arrows gonna find them. Then on the flank, we can see a pretty balanced setup of the cavalries. So 2 units of the veteran, 2 units of the regular, and 2 units of the mounted northern archer, which we mentioned has much lower charge compared to the raider variant, but they do have a shield. So that gives them more defensive stats. The archer damage is not very high. This is a standard archer damage, so even though it's 70 ammo, it's not going to hurt that much. I wonder if this harassment will even scare any sort of reaction from Will Be Deed. But like I mentioned before, you'd be surprised. Humans panic. So when you get shot, even though there's almost no damage, you tend to react a little bit too much. Oftentimes, as one of the commenters said when I ranked a lot of horse cavalries very high, is that for a lot of archer units, their damage is very low. You could just ignore them because there's only 30 of them. And that is true. If you realize that, then you're ahead of the curve. But my argument is, most players, when they get shot by fire arrows, will react. They will chase you down. So let's see if that's indeed the case. The generals, I believe, are all going to be tier 3. That's correct. And there's not a lot of fancy generals on this side. I think Yue Jin's the one that most people are not familiar with. He has an ability called Inward Focus. It not only boosts melee evasion by 50%, very similar to Adamant Resolve, but he boosts it for double the time, 60 seconds, and gives everyone 100% extra melee attack rate, which would just max it out. I think 50 might be the highest number you can have. So it's not going to matter for him, but for a lot of other generals, he can make them attack really, really fast and also maintain very high melee evasion. It's a very powerful ability. The cooldown's not very long either, especially since Cao Cao's also here, so he can help you reduce that. Aside from that, he's pretty standard in terms of being just a sentinel. Dian Wei is also a little bit special, but we see him a couple times in round 2. His calling card is that if he dips below 20% health, he can gain 6 times damage and cause terror. The trick is keep him alive after 20% health and also not routing because he's not unbreakable. His weapon is rather weak before that point, and that's really why I don't think Dian Wei is very strong. We'll see if he has a better performance here. So with that said, I think it's time for us to start this battle and see how both sides control their massive armies in this setup. So both sides are taking in the sights. There's no hurry here. Got to figure out what the enemy has and what you want to do. So we see some units pulling back here. The generals are going out by themselves. And the ranged cavalry are pushing up to harass. I'm not a huge fan of sending only 4 generals. Okay, pulling back, very good. Just maybe baiting out a reaction. And we have the harassment. The entire formation's pushing up by 0. See, both sides are not pressured to actually, enter into combat or walk towards each other. This is really just a choice situation. And we have a reaction here by Will Be Deed. He's pulling his left flank back. He's trying to use more of his frontline defense as a setup here. We got some harassment arrows going up against generals. This is just from auto fire. He didn't control that. Just they enter the range. And we have Zero shifting his generals to wherever the enemy generals are. Harassment from these, but the crossbow damage is going to come back and they're going to hurt. We'll see how that trade works. I don't think that's a good trade. He should keep pulling. The crossbow can't hurt him. You can go much wider with your angle here. Just patrolling the front lines by both general groups here. The crossbow is adjusting and the harassment damage is coming on. And we're getting a pretty defensive setup here by Will Be Deed. He's not really countercharging the cavalry into the enemy range. Perhaps doesn't want to get kited out. That's a possibility. He is about the same speed, 94, but with the charge bonus, he should be slightly faster. And the generals are just feeling themselves out. The cavalry is coming back. I think it's pretty smart that Will Be Deed is playing his generals close to his Tyrant Slayer so that if the generals does fight, these Tyrant Slayers can do damage to an enemy general, because the other side is just C-Down Cav, who's taking quite a beating from these archers. They're losing a few units left and right. Sure, 3 units doesn't seem like much, but that's 10%. And we have the adjustment. I wonder if Zero's trying to force them to adjust so much that he can push up his line to start shooting the front line here. Even though the front line is pretty impervious to range just by setting up into a shield wall. 95% is quite high. And the harassment continues, a little feeling out. A couple ability usage here, using his bow to try to do some damage. He can sneak in, you know, a couple good shots. Each of those bow shots, it hurt quite a bit. About 1.7k. Oh, patience has run out. As we see the generals commit. Lu Bu, once he gets into melee, he can roar and freeze them. And now the cavalry is moving, kind of intercepting where the generals could be. Pretty smart. I'm guessing a smash is incoming. Maybe doesn't even need to smash. And these northern cavalry, and we have the general killers. Finally selecting on general. Now, everyone targeting one general is not a good micro command, but I can understand that it's kind of hard to get them separate, but you see the crowding, and now they're getting charged. So this was not a balanced fight. Increased evasion right on top, and the fighting has started. Now, without Guojia here, the left side cannot use any of their ability. The right side can use all their ability, and that's where things become rather unbalanced, and all the Tyrant Slayer didn't get a charge off. They got charged. They were targeting generals, and then they got broken off in halfway through. Guojia's using the ability. That's going to be a huge difference. And we see the massive dismount here by Zero. Yeah, Zero is trying to kill off these generals. And we see Cao Cao has fallen already. He targeted one. And they're pulling out on their horseback. They're chasing on foot. The backup cavalry is here. The C-Down cavalry has arrived. The cavalry for Zero is nowhere to be seen. Too far away to have an impact here. And I wonder if these generals on foot can power through this. You can see them running around. They're just... Oh, I'm trying to get the camera. Sorry about that. They're chasing Guojia. Very good targeting. He's shutting down their abilities as well. He's routing. So this Guojia advantage is still real. This is key. Will BD need to kill this person right here? The ranged cavalries are being thrown in here. Another active. This could be from Dian Wei as well. Both Dian Wei and Cao Cao have this ability. They have 2 Flame the Phoenix. They're making quick work of the cavalry. Use both of them. They're trying to run away. Yeah. Will BD's biggest mistake was Guojia not going in with the army in that first wave. Keeping them on the middle of the army there and having the enemy Guojia shut down your ability usage basically doomed Cao Cao, Lu Bu. And then when Guojia did come, Zero was very correct in targeting the enemy Guojia first. Getting him killed frees up all their abilities and continues this advantage. And now these generals are kind of on the run. Their cavalry are routed by those Flame of the Phoenix. The main army cannot help in this situation. They're just trying to shore up that line. Maybe these generals can circle back in time and not get cut off. But we see that they're casting a pretty wide net. Maybe just trying to cut these guys off. No rush. This is the war right here. If they can kill these 3 generals, the rest of the battle is very free. Now the cavalry are bouncing back right before they rout off. That's pretty nice, but against these generals, I don't know if they're going to be much help. Yue Jin is not back on his horse. It's right there. Everyone else has remounted. He didn't want to wait for Yue Jin, so he's just going for it. And obviously the advantage is Guojia. Now Guojia is going to, you know, whatever amount of adamant resolve increases, Guojia shows up and use Wisdom of the River, and all those bonuses are gone. He has not used it yet. There we go. This is a mess, but I think with the difference in ability usage, it's gonna be big. Oh, Guojia is getting hit, so they're getting targeted right now. Will BD is trying to turn things around by killing off their Guojia right here in the middle. Maybe the cavalry is targeting him for sure. Here comes the generals, also targeting him, I think. But He Jin did not last. The morale is going to be a big factor as well. We mentioned how the morale is a little bit low. Not everyone's unbreakable. And with two different roars here, or same roar but two copies of it, and the ability advantage, this is going to be interesting. This is the lone survivor here, as Zhang Liang tried to pull out. And the rest of the army is just being ignored. I mean, the micro attention is definitely here. There's no way. So I guess Huang Fusong is the only person running out of this. Zhang Liang's trying to run. You can see him trying to move that way, but he's just getting bumped. There's no escaping this. He Jin's trying to find his horse. I think he realized he's not mounted and he's trying to mount him. And he has to walk all the way back to the horse. I wonder if Huang Fusong can micro this right now. Yeah, he found it. He discovered him. Maybe in the face health arrow instead of trying to hit him on the horseback? I'm guessing Zhang Liang's doomed. I'm not even going to watch there. In his face health arrow? He's not micro. Don't leave. He's debating whether he want to go hell arrow that or kill him. I would kill him. Every single general matter at this point. He can't make up his mind. Okay, he's leaving. He's trying to get a good hail arrow off, but the cavalries are here to stop him. And you can see Zero. He doesn't want to micro this right now. He's just pulling them. He's like, I don't want to fight these, impure units without my generals. I'm pulling everyone back, buying time for my generals to micro and win out the fight here. Very good choice. And now Huang Fusong's kind of stuck. I don't think he's going to be able to shoot off a hail arrow if these cavalry just shadow him the whole time. And Yue Jin's back. We have Protector of Heavens trying to help. Yue Jin did not charge, pulled away. Cavalry ran away. The cover is here, so they protected their lone survivor back into their army setup. Perhaps they can set up something to defend, but you can see Zero just pulling those army. There's a gap here. Infantries are slow. They are going for those, I bet. Let's see if he's going for those range units. It's so hard to protect range infantry. Like, you have so many infantry, yet, one miss. No, that's a good block. That's a great block. They didn't get the brace, so there's no, return damage, but just blocking them like that, that's excellent. It wasn't getting micro at that last moment, basically. But still, that pretty much takes out that unit. This is a very narrow corridor here. Let's see if you can pull that unit through. See, when you micro a bunch of units together, that's what happens. Like, the units are not going to move together. Can't find an angle. Getting collapsed on. Can they get out in time? Block that. Just got to body that couple units, and that breaks the charge. And they did. They pull through. No charge on the. Yet the morale is still dipping quite low. Attacked in the rear, damage sustained. The army's losing. Fighting cavalry. And that's why, range cavalry actually has a lot of bonus. The arrow is going to be worth a couple points of morale. 3 points. The fire, I think, is 4 points. And then fighting cavalry is another 2 points. So it's just 9 free points of morale just from one unit not doing really anything. A couple of trade fires. Huang Fusong is the only general left. And, every single unit had to work together to try to protect these 3 crossbow units, who has killed a combined total of 18 units. And here comes Zero's army coming back. Huang Fusong's quite far. Guojia is bouncing back. These two are the two with the roars and the smash. Oh, actually, I just realized Xia Houyuan doesn't have a roar. But he does have the smash. So there's only one roar on this team. And, oh, formation. The only formation that's good against generals is loose. You want to be in loose formation right now. Yeah, you want to avoid that situation at all cost. Right, you lost 60 units. You need to be in loose formation when the general charge at you, if you know they have Flame the Phoenix. And all of these precious Imperial Sword Guards getting Alternate smashed one there. Other guy smashed here. Cooldown came back. Another half unit gone. And they were also not in formation, so they can't knock anyone off their horse because they're a melee unit, a melee infantry, not a polearm. If they are in shield wall, they could knock them off. The general has returned. I bet he's fatigued. He's been everywhere. And we have the enemy units here. He's gonna smash. Oh, this entire unit's gone. Either shield wall, knock them off, or loose. Loose formation is actually very, very good against Flame the Phoenix. And these range units are gone as well. Yeah, no amount of protection can really stop generals from coming in and just killing off your range units. There's nothing you can do. This is like the modern Air Force, you know. Once you control the skies, enemy generals all dead. You can come in, do as you please. And Zero's pressing his infantry up now. Now that the enemy range are gone, he's going to use his crossbow to start weakening the enemy units, especially the one with high armor. Those crossbow with the armor piercing is going to do wonders against them. Guojia's being kept on reserve. I think he's trying to save him for perhaps one more Wisdom the River. Not going to commit him. Shutting down the Hail of Arrows, not really a big point. If he gets off one, he gets off one. At this point, it's not going to be a big deal. And we have the Northern Z infantry pressing up. We might finally have some infantry action. These Imperial units are calling this battle unfair, but they're going to be here fighting this out. Charge! Now, despite the number disadvantage, I still favor the Imperial units quite a bit. The stats just way different. Trying to get some flanking angles here, but there's a second wave. I don't know if they can flank. If they flank, they get flanked on top of that. Pulling away. The generals are back. Those two that can slam us. Zhuhan has a roar as well. See, fresh unit. 114 before the charge. A roar. A slam is incoming. Once he's done, 114 to 57. Right? It's devastating. It's also giving everyone a boost. Wang Fusong perhaps trying to get some sort of Hail of Arrow down. I think he did. He fired one. 60 kills. He fired at this. This is just tragic. Getting slammed all over the place. So I think this battle just basically came down to the general fight. Not bringing Guojia on that first wave and the, collective dismount by Zero to kill Cao Cao and Lu Bu very early on was pretty crucial. And the interception of the... Oh, a surrender. Okay. I mean, it was a doomed cause for sure. But the Tyrant Slayers didn't get to do anything because they got intercepted by the Northern cavalries right before they charged onto the general. That was sort of a pretty unfortunate play there. And then the rest was basically the generals outplaying each other. 6 versus 4 with the shutdown abilities. And the rest of the battle becomes pretty easy to describe once the general advantage is so lopsided. 6 generals versus 1 without any cover. So the units just slowly got depleted by Flame the Phoenix. 60 Imperial kills per Flame the Phoenix, basically. And there was nothing this army could do. So let's take a look at some of the numbers here. Yep, pretty impressive kill counts on the 2 generals with Flame of the Phoenix. 258, 432. Lu Bu got 1 slam in with a cluster of range cavalry. He killed pretty much 1 unit worth, probably half and half. And then he got killed. Cao Cao as well. I think, yeah, the main difference is Guojia's presence. Guojia was there for Zero, and Guojia wasn't there for Will Be Deed in that first exchange. Lost 2 generals. By the time Guojia did show up, all 6 generals dove at him and took him out. And once that happened, He Jin slowly got attrition out of the battle. Zhao Liang was left behind, couldn't charge out the enemy charges, basically keep body bumping him, keeping him basically right between the 6 generals. And then we have Huang Fusong, who made it out, but as a solo general, who was able to fire off, I think maybe 2 hail of arrows. There was a 60 kill one, and there was another one probably later on. There was nothing to do to cover these units. You can see in the brief moment of melee exchange, these units did very well. Many of these units were already half size by the time they actually got that melee exchange. These northern veteran units are not very good. None of the generals hit them, right? The hail of arrow hit this unit right here. And they just can't beat these even when these are at half health. So I actually didn't like these units. I feel like if these were Qingzhou units, it would have done a lot better, right? They would have lost a lot of morale, and they would have doubled damage back, and they would actually out-damage the enemy unit. But in this case, they didn't need that help. They were fine. And the brief moment of free fire from Zero's crossbow units did a lot of damage. You know, when you have range advantage, when you have general advantage, it's a lot easier to play out your army setup the way you want to. And the unit advantage on this side kind of evaporated when all the generals died. So that was a bit unfortunate, but a great match as Zero becomes the first player to lock his spot in the finals. And Will Be Deed should be proud of himself for getting this far. 4 rounds have passed, came up a little short. Maybe we'll see him again in a future tournament. So that's going to do it for this match. We'll move on to our other semifinal tomorrow, and we'll see you guys there. Bye.